Welcome to the July meeting for the North Bay Electric Auto Association. Let's see, we have a little bit of news to share this morning, and then we may have a shorter meeting because there can be, an opportunity for some of us who want to go out to Sonoma Raceway. I don't know. I'm actually not going today. I might be able to go tomorrow. I'm not sure if others are going to try to attend. And also I put in a little bit of information from Tor over the course of the month and a couple extra slides from news since your last update, Cecilia. And I don't see Tor, so we might have to skip over that slide and push it to August. But Tor did go on a road trip and had some insights. So let's just get started. I kind of think last July we had a very light meeting as well. And that was the month that Jerry and I ran out to the raceway and so forth.
And I've had multiple other meetings canceled from other organizations. So like July is the light month for everybody.
Yeah. So, I know that we didn't have, kind of full computer work done on this month's meeting where we pulled in all the news and stuff like that, but I'm not too concerned. We will ramp up for the fall, sure. I thought we could continue on the idea of just kind of adding a little bit of flavor to our introduction. So if you'd like to tell us who you are and how you get around, and maybe, how reliable your EV transportation has been. Bruce, I see you first on the screen. Would you like to start?
Sure. My big news is while I was in Indonesia, I wrote an offer on a house and came back and immediately started moving and packing. And I've also adopted two shelter cats who are terrorizing the house, but I have a new street address. Everything else is the same. It's 163 Island Drive. And I'm on the very south end of the island. I can see the really narrow spot in the channel where Lopez Island and San Juan pinch together. So it's a really beautiful area. And there's a great big federal park along the coast with foxes and deers and hiking trails. So I was thinking maybe sometime, maybe a small group could have a EV trip and get to experience our totally wacko ferry system and do a little driving around here. My most used vehicle right now has been my e-Golf, because I can actually get more boxes in the back of the e-Golf with the seat down than I can with the Tesla. But the Tesla's got a roof rack, so some things I can put on there, and I'm basically shuttling everything back and forth about 12 miles each way through town. So I've got all the boxes here. They're strewn all over the place, but I'm just delighted with the location. Have a great view and nice neighbors. So that's it for me.
I'd love to take you up on that. And it sounds like you are basically doing an electric move, which
yes, absolutely.
How big is your driveway and your garage? What does that look like?
It's narrower doors than my other one, but more room inside. So I actually have room to get 2 cars in and 2 kayaks inside, and it has a workbench in the back. And it's got an endless pool. Do you know what those are? The kind that it's not like an infinity pool that looks like you're going off the edge of the world. It generates a current and you swim against it to exercise. So I've got an indoor pool house. It's just really sweet. It's like the whole house is like a sauna. I'm definitely going to have to look into ways to get some augmentation to the power supply. There's no solar panels, but it does have a geothermal heat pump, which is nice. It seems to work well. So I just haven't looked at the electricity bills for winter yet. Might be scary.
So it sounds like some more conversion project opportunities.
But lots of space. I've got 3 bedrooms and it's hard to find camping spots around here, but if you start early enough, there's other places in town, little hotels and B&B Airbnbs, but we're just getting jammed right now with tourists. So
Wow. Thank you.
Hey, Bruce, so what is there a high demand for your old place, or are you keeping it or selling it, or?
I'm racing to get it ready to sell, because with the interest rates going up, it's kind of scaring a few people off, but it's there's only one other house in my neighborhood, and it's a really sweet spot because it's on city water and it's about 2 miles from town, and it's surrounded by trees. It's a smaller lot than my new place, but the mortgage payment, I'm going to have to be eating lots of rice and beans and cutting back on international travel, where I have to buy gasoline, aviation fuel to get somewhere. So, which might be a good on my carbon footprint too, is just having to stay home. But anyway, I'm trying to sell my house. Happy to send anybody pictures if you know anybody that's retiring, wants to come up this way.
It's tempting. David Heacock?
My life sounds kind of boring compared to that. That sounds like paradise there, Bruce. I live in Fairfield, California. I've been driving my 85 Avante conversion more and more. Seems to be, from a reliability standpoint, it's fine, except for that same old cell tower problem. I can't figure out what it is. That's how I get around.
I have mystery software glitches like that, David. Mike Newell?
Morning, everybody. Yeah, pretty quiet last month for me. As far as reliability goes, so our model year 2020 Kia Niro is actually just plugging along. Haven't had it in the shop since I had to have the motherboard replaced a year ago. But that has turned into our main EV, because my 2011 Leaf, still drive it to work every day, but it is down to like 30 to 35 miles of range. So I've been driving that one for the last 6 months with the trouble light on, that can't quite decipher the error codes that come out of the Leaf Spy for that, but I'm just gonna drive it until it won't go anymore.
It says trouble, but it keeps going.
It does, yeah. So I'm hopefully it's just because of the battery, the main battery is low on capacity, but I don't know that for sure. But I only work 4 miles away from my house. It's up a big hill, but so far no trouble getting there and back.
Cecilia?
Hi, I drive a 2018 Model 3 again, and I live in West Sonoma County in California. So reliability, I have not been stranded by this car, although I did go in for service for a couple of weeks after the rear drive unit failed. But it gave me warning, and I was able to get that taken care of before I got stranded. So that's my reliability story.
Hey, Cecilia, I think last month, right, when we were talking, you had it in just for some maintenance or something, but you had like a,
I did.
didn't you have a
Had
replacement car?
a loaner, or it was actually rental from Enterprise.
So how many days were you out of your car?
I believe it was like 12 or 13 days.
Oh, okay.
Maybe the parts constraints are, part of those problems, huh? It doesn't seem like they would take a car in and intend to keep it 12 days up front, but once you start working on it and you need a part, I wonder what happens then.
Yeah, it's like they don't have like inventory of parts, because you want to like preserve those for like building new cars, but once you have a need for it, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I have to say I have a little fear of, any little fender bender, because, you end up with whatever you get from Enterprise, I guess. Mark?
Yeah, we're enjoying our new Ionic 5. We've had just about 2 months now. This just works great. And, you know, we came from our 2013 RAV4. So one of the reasons we didn't really need a new car, except I wanted to get all the safety features and stuff, which the 2013 really didn't have. So that's been an interesting learning curve. And I have to say that, you know, the estimated range of 303 miles, I've not driven it down below about 15%, but it seems to be right on. I'm averaging 4 miles per kilowatt, and it's just, you know, usable about 75 kilowatt hour battery. So I would say, you know, on driving on the freeway, I'd probably get like 270 if it was 100% charged. So, but those are really realistic numbers. But we do like the safety features and, you know, all the other thing that goes with a new car. So, and the dealer was great to work with. I have to say that over there at Manly, and it was an MSRP price. So that's the car we drive now. That's all.
Maybe we should do a little detailed breakdown on it in one of our future months, Mark. I'm curious about it. And you know, as all of us are getting into older cars, and we don't know what a 2022 is like. Brad?
Yeah, excuse me. I'm Brad. I live in Santa Rosa. I drive a 2004 Honda Civic Hybrid that I've had since 2007. Oh, it's got about 180,000 miles on it. The last really major repair issues were I needed to replace the hybrid IMA battery in summer of 2013. Honda did that under warranty. It was like 67,000 miles or something like that. And then later in summer of 2013, I had to replace the entire transmission, which sucked because it was like at 68,000 miles at that point. And Honda, it was out of warranty for the transmission because the hybrid battery is warranted for, or it used to be warranted for 10 years or 100,000 miles or maybe more because there were some lawsuits over it. But the transmission wasn't. It was just part of the normal warranty. And but thankfully, Honda of America picked up, I think it was like half the cost, but it still ended up costing like $1,900. But you know, that was many years ago. So it's been a decently reliable car, inexpensive to own.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Jerry?
I'm still driving my 2018 Leaf, and it has over 20,000, probably 25,000 miles on it. And I can't see any decrease in its range over that time. Now, I had the 2011 Leaf, and by 25,000 miles, I started seeing decrease. By 70,000 miles, 77,000 miles, I was down to about 60 miles worth of range or 50 miles worth of range, something like that. And this one's been reliable. 3 months after I got it, we were talking about speed limits while I was up in Alaska, people going over speed limits. And 3 months after I had the 2018, I was going down Highway 101 near Mill Valley, and I was doing 67 miles an hour on the cruise control in the 55 mile an hour zone when somebody came along and drove along the side of my car at about 80 miles an hour. And so mine was in the shop for a long period of time as well. And I was surprised how much they had to replace of it. So with the newer cars, with the new technology, as far as reliability, that's one of the things that's a challenge. Even a crack in the windshield. You guys recommended, actually one friend recommended a really good window shop. I got my window replaced, but it took an extra 6 hours because they have to realign the radar that's in the windshield and level out the car and stuff like that. And in the case of the time that they drove along the side of the car, besides the $12,000 worth of repairs, they had to go back to the dealer because there's electronics and everything else, sensors all through the vehicle. And this thing about having a new 2022, I'd like to get one. A friend of mine found a EV6 with only $3,000 over MSRP. We're getting closer. The newer cars all have what I think Ray used to always talk about. It's not automated driving, it's a safer vehicle because the vehicle tells you so many conditions that you're about to get into and says, do you really want to do that? And if you really do something totally stupid, the bloody thing takes you off the road and stops and says, you really are not going to do that. And I find that really comforting. I find it a lot easier to drive. And I think, now on the MTC Policy Advisory Council, representing seniors, which is hard for me to do. I don't think of myself as a senior, but in my driving habits, I got to tell you, as a senior, driving a new car makes it so that you can drive a lot longer through your life because it can make you so you don't run into the high school students when they're leaving school. So,
yeah. I wonder if you got sideswiped, if the heavy batteries of your car kept you tracking on the road versus like being pushed off the road.
that's a possibility. It was a bizarre case because I got hit and I saw the guy pulling off the highway. I went and followed him off the highway and then he jumped back on the highway and hit 90 miles an hour, so I couldn't catch him. The bizarre part was telling the highway patrolman, he said, well, how fast were you going? I said 67. I had a program for that. And he didn't say anything about doing 67 in a 55-mile-an-hour zone. He said, let me see if I can find the guy. They did.
Yeah.
Did they find him?
No. And in fact, I tried to get the license number and I should be like my Italian cousins. You got to remember to have a camera with you all the time. So you're taking pictures of the vehicles around you when they hit you.
Well, with the Tesla, you just, honk the horn and it records that, saves that last, 2 minutes or something?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have to read the manual to learn that?
Probably, yeah.
You have to
Or,
turn that
or
on.
listen to all the podcasts.
Yeah. Well, that was the nice thing about the Leaf. It comes with a whole bunch of videos.
David Harris.
Yes, good morning. So we are on our fourth Nissan Leaf, and the Leafs will expire in January, so it's time to be thinking about replacements. We drive so few miles, it's kind of ridiculous. Because the other car is a 2017 Bolt, and I did stop in at Platinum this week and looked at the Bolt EUVs that they've got, and I said, well, okay, so are these selling? Well, yeah, everything we've got is sold, and we've got a bunch sitting in the lot in Benicia and in Milpitas, but we can't deliver them because they don't have battery upgrades yet. Well, they did an upgrade on my, I got the battery pack swapped out in January. Heck, if they'd have given me some money, I'd have let them put it in a new car. But GM's going to work off all of the customer cars before they do their inventory. Well, why don't they give us an incentive to let them exchange batteries in all that inventory of 2022 Bolt, the EUV, the utility version of it, are sitting on the lot still because they're putting the battery packs that they get. And at the time they did my battery pack, they had like 10 or something in the yard, but now delivery is an issue for everything. They say that they can't get enough truck drivers to move stuff around. It seems so. Reliability.
Availability. Yeah.
Yeah,
So much for
availability
just in time, huh?
is a problem.
Yeah.
I'll stop at that.
Bill Baldavich.
Yeah, I took away Janice's picture finally.
It was you. Okay.
Well, we've been domestic partners officially for 40 years now. We've had the Kia Soul EV since November 2015, so almost 6.5 years now. And we haven't spent money on anything except tires in that. And it started out with a low range, like in the 110 range, 110 miles. It's still about 100. And yeah, once under warranty, the onboard charger was replaced, and that was no big deal. Although that was the only time we had to be towed. But we love the car for its size. So we are now looking to get another car because the Janice, the picture you saw of her, she just got a Guggenheim grant this year. And that's going to kick our income up where we could probably get the that tax credit because we'll owe taxes now. So we want to get a new vehicle, and as we started looking, nobody's got them in stock. You know, all you can do is get on a waiting list for various cars, and it's going to be tough. And we're restrained to look for something. We don't want a big car. We don't want a long car. And our car is about the length of a Bolt, but a lot of those, as we heard, they're still waiting to replace some of the batteries, and so this is going to be throughout the rest of the year. Who knows how long it'll take to get a new EV for tax purposes, and we started getting our names on a list. We looked at the Volvo XC40, I guess, yesterday. That was the first one we looked at. And as you were talking about, Jerry was talking about the amazing safety features with all these fancy, that's a whole new school of learning. I guess. So it'll be a busy EV year learning what's going on and trying to purchase something. But we love that Kia Soul. Unfortunately, they're not making them again.
Right. Well, take us on your journey. I'm curious about what you end up with.
Yeah, well, I'll let you know. And
yeah, Lawrence, glad to see you again.
Well, good to be here. So as you can tell, I'm down in Palo Alto, and my girlfriend has a 2019 Bolt. We drive it once or twice a year to LA, and then she drives it on a 6-mile commute every day. And then occasionally on weekends we'll go out to the coast and do other trips. So as far as reliability goes, one time coming back from LA, we couldn't get it to charge at the Electrify America fast charger. And we ended up staying at a hotel overnight. And while we were there on a level 2 charger charging up, and while we were there, I did some research, and it turns out it's a fairly common problem with the high-powered chargers. The cord set and handle is so heavy, especially with earlier Bolts, but also with ours and the newer ones. The inlet to the car is a little bit floppy. And if you don't actually hold up the handle and take the weight off the connection, the deformation prevents it from locking in properly. So we learned that after we'd already paid for the hotel, and we're a few hours into relaxing. So I tell everybody who's got a Bolt or thinking about getting a Bolt, just be sure to hold up that cord set until it latches in. And it seems to only be an issue with Electrify America, but maybe as there are more high-powered chargers out there, and maybe even with other cars, it's just something to pay attention to. But yeah, that was frustrating because we went to a dealership and they weren't able to help us, and we disconnected our battery and waited a few minutes and reconnected it to reset all the electronics, and that clearly reset the electronics, but it didn't help. And anyways, like I say, it took some time on the forums before I discovered the issue. So anyways, spread the word. Besides that, we had a bit of a clunking in the back, and I figured it sounded like bushings. And then when we took it in, of course, they wrote it up as a cluck in the back. So they were looking for chicken. They didn't find. But they did decide that, and then they wrote it up as the guy at the service desk, this is in Redwood City, said, oh yeah, they have to replace the bearings. And I said, bearings? It doesn't sound like bearings, it sounds like bushings. But in the end, you looked at the write-up, and the write-up said bushings, and they couldn't get replacement bushings, so they replaced the whole rear end, the whole rear axle. You know, figure that out. And this was before COVID. Well, yeah, I think it was before COVID. So, the dealership drove the car for a couple thousand miles and lost one of the keys before leasing it to my girlfriend. And it took quite a while. It took months to get that second key from them. But in any case, so we got the car back and had a new rear end. But then occasionally, when we going up a curb cut, there was a clink. So we went from a clunk to a cluck to a clink, and we were getting ready to go on a long trip. So I got under there with a flashlight and pulled a orange S hook out from the back under hanging above the axle in the rear, and I recognized that as a caliper hanger for when you're doing brake work or when you're replacing the axle and you don't want to disconnect the brakes. You hang the brake on its S hook. So they left the S hook behind, and I still have it. You haven't gotten around to returning it. But anyway, so not terribly impressed with the service, but the car works fine. I'm really impressed and happy with it. You know, people say, oh, it's the ride isn't very nice. And it's like, well, it rides like a sports car, and that's fun. Unfortunately, though, when you really step on it, the wheels spin. And the guy, and it's what's it called? It's got traction control. So I asked the guy at the dealership, what's with that? It's like, oh, Americans like their wheels to spin. You know, if you wait a few seconds, it stops. And it's like, yeah, but by then you're off the road and in the ditch. Whereas when I tried out a friend's Tesla and I stomped on it, the wheels did not spin. And that's what traction control is. So not entirely impressed with that aspect of it. You know, cup holders are more important than emergency indicator lights. So we drove a Volt for 3 years. So that's the plug-in hybrid. Gets about 45 or 50 miles of range, and then about 45 to 50 miles per gallon. And that's also a Chevy. So the issue there was the car was so smart, it tried to change its oil on the way to LA. Well, it got through the first half of dumping it out, but it didn't bother refilling it, and it didn't tell us about it. So the check engine light comes on, and we call OnStar, and they say, well, is it solid or flashing? It's like, well, it's solid. It's like, oh, don't worry about it. Maybe you close the gas cap 2 clicks instead of 1. So why don't you, next time you fill up, close it 1 click and go through 2 full tanks of gas, which of course around town could be 2 years, but we were on the way to LA. And if it's still a problem, then bother us about it. So anyways, we went to LA, we came back, and took it into the shop. They plugged in the computer, and the mechanic said, oh, it's got a valve timing issue. So he puts it up on the hoist, and then he sees the oil sheening across the entire bottom of the car and says, oh, valve timing has to do with oil pressure because of the servos that control the valve timing are oil actuated. But if you remember back to the early days of engines, internal combustion engines, there is some kind of indicator telling you either the oil level or the oil pressure is low. Most important thing with an engine, keep the oil in it. Well, the modern cars are too smart to bother to tell you that. They want to sell you a new engine instead of telling you you've got an oil problem. So anyways, if you know of anybody who drives a hybrid of any kind, and that check engine the trouble light comes on, have them check all their oil, their liquid levels, and ignore what OnStar says unless they say something really useful. But anyways, having OnStar tell us, oh, it's probably not a problem unless it's flashing. And it's like, if the oil pressure was low enough to throw off the valve timing, clearly we were having lubrication issues. So that car was not purchased at the end of the lease.
Hey, you hit 4 points that rang for me. Number one, the one on the fast charging. I wondered why I ran into that problem in the 2018 Leaf in a number of places. And I went from station to station until finally it started to work. And I'm thinking it's the station, not my car. I got worried that it was the car because I needed a fast charge. And the symptoms that you laid out are exactly the symptoms I saw. In fact, it would start to charge. And then when I let go, it stops. So maybe that's the issue. The problems we ran into in the vehicle are interesting. The bearing one, Caleb's not here today, but Caleb and I did electric trucks and buses. There's something about the electrics and the motors and how they work on differentials and the drivetrain, which is a lot more than an engine does. And it seems to wear out bearings. So we spent a lot of time trying to find different ways with different kinds of bearings that would last a little bit longer. The S-hook, and I have to tell this story because I was doing service on vehicles. I'm an IT guy. I'm climbing underneath the buses doing services on and replacing units. And so, you know, there's cooling systems through a lot of electronics, and you got to make sure the coolant doesn't go all over you. And I'm doing it out in the field in front of Google. The next day somebody calls and says, hey, the bus you worked on yesterday, it only drives 60 feet and then it shuts down, and it drives 60 feet and it shuts down. I left a clamp on the cooling line after I finished working. And so the system kept overheating because it couldn't cool. So it could only drive 60 feet and then it was shut down. But anyway, you've run into a lot of things that we start finding with EVs. And I think the entire industry is going to pick up, learn the lessons, and take care of these things. That probably all that stuff happened with gasoline-powered engines in the early days as well. So it's kind of cool to hear you're running into the symptoms. Hopefully all the solutions are going to show up.
Yeah.
Well, some of the problems, of course, are just industry issues. So I imagine, you know, the Volt had an engine and a motor, and I imagine all Chevy cars are like that, where the check engine light, you know, that they've taken away the oil indicator light because the car is too smart for that. You know, it reminds me of the Airbus. They put in a feature on their airliners where if you dialed in an automatic descent and you happen to be actually increasing the altitude when you dialed it in, it doubled the rate of descent without telling the pilot.
Yeah.
And that caused a number of airplanes to hit mountains and people to die because the pilots, A, didn't know about the feature, or B, they didn't notice they were actually rising at the time they locked it in. You know, so it's these engineers just don't allow the operator to have enough information to safely operate their vehicle.
Yeah. Well, the 2004 Prius had a comparable problem. I'm driving down the Highway 280 one day, and a light comes up with a code, and my son's in the car, and we look it up. It says, take it immediately to the dealer. So I call the dealer while we're driving, and he says, well, we can take it in 2 weeks. I say, I'm on the highway, and it says, take it immediately to the dealer. It's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. I roll into a gas station. I said, well, while I'm here, put in gas. What it really meant was you're out of gas. Now, since it's a hybrid, it will keep going down the highway, but it wouldn't tell me I was out of gas. It told me I had an emergency.
Exactly. You know, the information's all there. I mean, well, the information's often all there from the computer, but they don't give it to you on the screen. On the infotainment screen, you have to go buy an OBD reader, code reader. And even then, you know, they don't tell you the oil pressure is low. They tell you the valve timing's off. I mean, it's frustrating. It's out of focus. There you go. What is it?
An OBD.
It's my ODB reader.
Oh, okay.
It's buzzing out for some reason. We've got a couple more people, but we can come back to this as well.
Can I make one comment as part of what
sure.
Jerry and Lawrence just said? This is Mark again. You know, we got this new 2022 Ioniq 5, and it's got a manual on it that's not too big. You know, I don't know, 5 by 8 or something, or maybe smaller than that. 500 pages. It's got so much information in there. It's such small print, and the pictures and the little diagrams are so small. They're not helpful at all. And the other thing is they have you can go to the website and look this stuff up too. It's the same way. It's still real small too. You can't blow it up. It gets all fuzzy. So that's not helpful. So I've gone back to the dealer probably 6 times in 2 months they've been very helpful. And it was a very simple thing. I said, how do I do this? And they said, oh, hit this and do that. Oh, okay. You know, and it was very simple. But part of it is going from a 2013 car to a 2022 car. People who coming from a 2020 car probably wouldn't have these issues, at least if they had a Hyundai, because a lot of that stuff is on all their cars now. It's not just an EV, but all the safety features on all the gas cars too. And they have screens, you know, we might have a little more information, but it's very interesting. So I'm sorry I hijacked the thread, but I thought I'd throw that out there too.
That might be a business idea to do an aftermarket version of that manual, because it sounds like they locked in the font size somehow. Bernie.
Well, nothing new here, but people were talking about their Leafs, and our original electric car was the 2015, I think it was, Leaf. And I don't know how many miles we have on it, but my wife drives it mostly, and she's had lots of problems when she wants to charge out somewhere. She'll get somewhere and the charger doesn't work, and there's only one of them or two of them, and you know, traveling with the Tesla is just, you know, a joy, because you drive into a charging station and there's, I don't know, 15, 20 chargers in many cases. And they usually work. Usually all of them work. So I can understand that people are hesitant to buy electric when they hear these stories about the charging issues that people are having.
Absolutely. Woody, second to last.
Good morning, all. Woody Hastings, still driving a 2013 Chevy Volt with the V as in Victor.
And I'm Sonia, and I drive a 2019 Model 3. Last month, we had an error on the seatbelt, which sounded concerning, but it was just kind of an adjustment, but someone did have to come out and make the adjustment and maybe put in a little plastic part that threads the seatbelt cleaner or something like that. But there was something about how the seatbelt was seated on the seat. So kind of a fancy error of some sort with a simple solution. And also, I just wanted to mention, because Lawrence brought it up, our 2014 Volt, as in V, as in Victor, had kind of a connection sleeve issue over time, because we've been putting a little pressure on it when we were plugging it in. And that connection sleeve, that little port, they just replaced it. And it was really pretty simple and low cost, as I recall. I can't remember if there was some warranty on it or not. But unrelated to having kind of like a heavy thing sitting on it, because it doesn't have fast charging. Volts don't have fast charging, but it still wore out over time somehow. And I think there was some pressure on it, sometimes when we were plugging it in. But since then, it's been fine. So I will move us forward. We don't have that much going. So this was pretty interesting conversation. There was a little pent up demand to talk about reliability, which is fine.
Can I throw in one more comment on the charging?
Oh, sure.
So once with the Bolt, apparently once it locks in, it's all good. But you need to hold it until it locks in, and then you can let go. And everything I read on the forums is like, once it's locked in, you can walk away from it. So what Gerald was describing sounded a little bit different.
Okay. Yeah, maybe three different issues there with the connections. Okay, so just kind of going through a little bit of chapter business real quick here. We've still got our Google groups that are working just great. We've had a couple of people request to join into NBEAA Club, and I checked one of them and it looked like someone had already processed it, which is kind of a nice system we've got going on, accepting members into our club Google group.
And I was the one who processed them, because he called me ahead of time. It was Alex Goodman
okay.
from in Sebastopol.
Great. Yeah, I'm hoping that part of that kind of processing is that our NBEAA.org site is just so clean and clear, and we've got, you know, more people familiar with kind of going to that site or recommending that site, and then they can kind of join. The other thing that's happening off of NBEAA.org might be that we can kind of set up the Zoom link as well. I can't remember if I put that in here. Bruce, now that you're back from Indonesia, and once things settle down for you, I wanted to coordinate getting our new balance from the EVA parent chapter, and then of course that kind of flows into working on hybrid meetings and getting some equipment as well. So this slide here is just a little reminder that you're welcome to send in news to us. When you send in news to us, you can send it to NBEAA team@googlegroups.com, this little green one right here, and we will process it and get it into a monthly meeting item. We don't send an announcement anymore. We no longer remind you, but you can send in news items that you find interesting, or you can join our group of collaborators who create slides for the meeting as well. We also have this NBEAA Discuss Google group, which works pretty well. You can join it separately and have intra-month conversations, I should say. So I did a little redesign on the slide, just, you know, for some kicks. And basically, we always have the video of the June meeting. We have it on the website. And we also build a PDF of the presentation, which has active links. So you open the PDF, you can hover over a link, you can click on a link, you can get to every news article, everything that we've mentioned in the month. And to do that, it's a little circular reference here. You can download the presentation of this link. So maybe we can put it in a chat, or actually you can just go to nbeaa.org and get it there. Yeah. So I've had a couple of ideas lately about trying to field speakers for future months, but I just wanted to announce it out there. We could use a topic or a speaker in August. And also I might have a conflict in September, so we might need a presentation lead in September. But in August, we're good. So that month ahead, we're good. But if you've got any ideas for people who want to talk about new car purchases, I think that I'm personally interested, you know, on the Ioniq 5 and the EV6, and we've got Bill looking at a Volvo. That's 3 different cars out there that aren't Teslas or Bolts. So that's good. This brings us to our hybrid update. We're down from about 40 per 100,000 to 32 per 100,000 right now in Sonoma County. And I don't know if it's going to rattle around from here or go further down, hopefully the latter. So in the meantime, you know, I've kept this slide in here to just kind of remind us all that this is our North Star of trying to get together with hybrid meetings. I was over at a book club meeting, and a friend had a product on Amazon called a gimbal. And I can't remember if I sent it around to the team, but you can just kind of hold it, and it does a slight balance of the video, so you don't have that Blair Witch Project experience of feeling nauseous. It kind of steadies the video and improves the panning of the video if you want it to pan in a steady way. But it's kind of simple. So I don't know what you guys are all looking at.
Well, the owl was the one I saw in one meeting, which was interesting because it finds the speaker, it shows the room. But I haven't tested it tried it on my own or found a place where I can pick one up and see how it works. I'm wondering if we need to go to Best Buy or someplace else where you would think that somebody at this point has thought to set up a demo room in order to sell, but I haven't found one yet.
Yeah, that sounds more sophisticated than the gimbal, and that would be kind of cool to test it. I guess the other thing would be to see if you can purchase it, try it, and return it if it's not right.
Well, my check with a friend of mine was the one to use it first when he had a meeting with his team and DJ and I. And I was kind of impressed. I asked him what it was, and that's how I learned about it in the first place. But he may have moved on and gotten a much more sophisticated system now since he's using it for his business. So maybe I can borrow from him.
Bruce, you're to the left of me and you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just thought of a couple of things that might be worth mentioning because you did have Mark Frohnmeyer talk to the group about Archimoto. So there are, I'm guessing there's about 5 of them up here now. And when the first one showed up at the facility, I want to say there's a couple that live on a very large boat, and they bought the I don't know what they're called. They're like ladybugs. They're little red side-by-side scooter things that belch and all kinds of smoke and slow traffic. Well, anyway, the Archimoto was finally finished and made available at $18,000. Well, they couldn't afford to buy a fleet at that rate, so they worked out a deal to split the basically what revenue they got, and they went from 1 to about 5 as the tourist season bumped up. And the rate they told me in the beginning, I don't know if they've changed it, was I think it's $180 for a half day. And going, who would pay that much money? But they love them, and they have to be governed because they're considered a motorcycle up here, and you need a motorcycle endorsement, to be able to ride something like that. It's the way they're accommodating these new electric bikes, which there are assortment of up here. So anyway, if you want to try out an Archimoto, they've been cruising by every time I come and go home, they're out. And also the little gas belching ones are still out. Interesting way to see the island. And the other thing I wanted to mention, it sounded like you're talking about a stabilized camera for the actual speaker presentation. There's a gadget called the Movi that was made by Motion. They seem to be focusing on cell phone accessories now. I'm not sure it's still available, but I have one, and I can send it to somebody who wants to try it out. It basically clamps your cell phone, generic cell phone clamp, and it's a 3-axis gimbal that stabilizes the image so you can pan and film, and you can probably find some videos to see the difference that it makes. But I'm willing to send it down because I haven't been able to. I've got too many gadgets now to play with, so including 2 cats in a house. So anyway, if anybody's into going in the field and shooting videos of people in their new car and want to try that, let me know.
So wasn't it the device that you did send out? That one also was something that went onto a cell phone. I didn't see it as being a camera by itself, was it?
It wasn't. It was an iPhone attachment that tried to stabilize the iPhone. So the Movi sounds a little different. I'd be curious, and Jerry, I know you're going to have a little bit more discernment if you wanted to get that from Bruce and test it out.
Yeah, I'd rather get a camera of some sort. So when you're talking about, Bruce, also is for an iPhone or for a phone, right? Or
yeah. If you got a high-end iPhone, you got a pretty good camera system. The ones with the laser ranging, the 12 Max Pro, I think.
Yeah.
David Harris, you had your hand up too.
Yeah, I've been interested in this camera issue for hybrid meetings, and I mean it's the 360 that allows you to have people around a table as well as people remote like we are now. and the price range, you know, from $79 to $1,500 really makes me curious as to how there can be such a huge price range and things that are the descriptions say are have very similar capabilities. But um, and Amazon, certainly for buying things and trying them out and return, now that you can take a small item like that from Amazon and return it at any Whole Foods, it is the most painless way to buy something, try it out, and return it is to buy it from Amazon. And I've had the experience also multiple times now of buying things that are returns off line from Amazon. And if there's anything wrong with it, like I bought some walkie-talkies that the said it came with AA batteries, a set of 4, so there were 3 times 4, 12 batteries missing. And I called them up and they said, we'll just credit you the whole purchase back, keep them. And that's not uncommon with Amazon. If you buy something that they have sent out to say it's a complete system that's been returned, and if there's anything wrong with it, they'll just let you keep it for free. So
unfortunately, if you send things back to Amazon, apparently quite a bit of what you return, they just throw out instead of sending out to other people.
Yeah, I'd read that recently, that they were thinking about telling you to keep things to reduce the waste or something like that, or reduce the return shipping was fruitless or something like that. Yeah. All right. Well, if anyone wants to make progress over the next month on equipment, I feel like we still have a little time. This online version of this, meeting is working pretty well during this time when we might prefer not to have to wear masks, that sort of thing. But
I'm really looking forward to the donuts because I've been losing weight and I think I need the donut.
the donuts would be nice, and outdoor, hands-on looking at cars would be kind of fun too.
I did stop
We
in.
got into this, right?
I did stop in at Thunderstruck this week, and Brian was there, and I talked to him, and I said, "Well, we haven't seen you on the Zoom meetings." He said, "Oh, I don't make them, but I'm hoping you're coming back here." So we do have a reaffirmed invitation from Brian, and he was busy getting his 3 vehicles ready that they took down this weekend to the Holly, what do they call it, high voltage event.
Yeah.
So I did have a chance to carry on conversation with Brian while he was working on the things that he's getting ready to take down there this weekend. So
Thanks for that update.
Yeah.
Great. So our other ideas about getting out and about, this is kind of coming from Brad's original idea of doing farmers markets on Wednesdays. We're still looking at new ideas for getting out and about. And I wanted to just start to talk about one idea that came up this month. I met with a friend, David, who runs one of the Rotary Club meetings in Sebastopol, and he has this idea that he would like to do an EV event that would be a charitable event that would introduce people to EVs in a really kind of thorough way, but also bring in money for charity at the same time. And so they're good at running events, and they're good at making them well hosted and so forth. And it seemed like the only piece that he didn't have was like access to a lot of people who knew about a lot of different kinds of cars and maybe their cars themselves, and so that's kind of a nice fit. And they have something going on this October that's a charitable event. I think it's a lobster feed. So I just offer that out there because I know that this is further out than October. It would be, possibly next January or February, but I'd like to keep talking with him about that if anyone has any questions or concerns. So that was one idea. Lawrence, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to say I appreciate you think keeping the hybrid meetings in mind, because it's unlikely I'll come up in person for any of your meetings, but I do appreciate being involved. And if they start before any fancy equipment there, I could imagine just a laptop at the end of the table that kind of takes in the whole room. Might not be able to see people's expressions, but hopefully the microphone would come through okay, or maybe there could be a remote corded microphone just in the middle of the table. So just some thoughts.
Yeah, you're not the only one, Lawrence. We've got Caleb, Bruce is up in Washington State. Caleb lives down in Southern California. So we want to make sure everybody stays on.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah. So what kind of along that, Sonia, is actually I got stopped going into the CVS the other day from a person who bought a used Leaf like in the last year, and she said, she actually didn't have it with her. She was still driving her other ICE car, but she said she was having some charging problems and was just asking me some questions. And I'm pretty sure it's because, she bought a used Leaf. It probably had some configuration, that the previous owner had that she didn't even know how to undo. So that's kind of a topic for something like this, kind of a few seasoned drivers, showing up at events and answering questions. Because I think we have more and more of that with so many used EVs being on the market.
Yeah.
What would be kind of interesting is if you had a large enough group, if you did breakout sessions by make and model or something like that. And also if we kind of brainstormed some of those, things like Lawrence brought up, or the idea of advanced settings. Like I set my Leaf to start charging at 3 a.m. And who knows what the purchaser of that Leaf learned once they plugged it in. I can't remember. I think I was kind and I removed that before selling it. I can't remember.
I think it would be really handy on the website to have links to the various models users forums, because I find sometimes they're difficult to find, but once I'm there, it's a wealth of information, and most everything that I can think of has already been discussed.
I've been meaning to do some work on adding resources to the resources page, and user forums are a great idea. And Cecilia, I haven't gotten to it. I think I'm set up, and I need to follow your directions a little bit more closely on how to edit from the resources page. But if anyone else has an interest in that, there's a wealth of things that we could do. I mean, we could create some affinity pages as well with our own notes about, like, this might be important if you just acquired a new Leaf or something like that. Yeah. So I did want to come back to the slide here, because I think, Jerry, you had an idea also about just setting up something general around meeting at a supermarket or a farmer's market, but maybe at a time when more people can attend. So, Brad's idea on Wednesdays, I don't think we really had many takers, even though that's a good event. We just didn't have a lot of Wednesday people. But a supermarket event that was, like, for me personally, Saturdays are my day. If we did something that's a different time and place and more casual. Did you have some thoughts on that?
But the idea wasn't a new one. It was when we lived in Sunnyvale, before we had an EV, there would be EV events, and 90% of the cars would be, there wouldn't be production because there wasn't production. And then a couple of production vehicles started to show up. But I remember going to a local grocery store one day, and out on the lot, some people had to sign up, and they had 2 EVs parked there. And people just started walking up to talk to them. They weren't selling anything. They were selling the idea of EVs. This is 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago now. And I'm just going, you don't need a special event. You need a place that people show up and would see something, say, hey, what's going on? Sebastopol, any given Friday, you see people at the corner of Highway 12 and Highway 116 with signs up about whatever event or whatever issue they have. We have lots of places in the county where we could just, if we had a table, we have materials, and we bring a couple of vehicles, maybe you'd see 15, 20 people. But maybe that's what you're going to see also at the market, or you might see more, but I don't think we need to be in a special place, and we just need to be organized.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. You know, I've often thought that, you know, directly after this meeting, you know, an early afternoon hour or something like that, you know, it's like, if we take the energy of gathering for this meeting, I don't know if people feel like, okay, now I have to go on to other things with my family, or it's like, you know, can you do another hour? So maybe picking the best time. The other idea I had was kind of an off cycle Saturday. So the third Saturday of every month at 10. And then we could pick the place, the time and the place. So
Actually, the first Saturday of every month at the Fiesta Market, when the Ace Hardware has the 30%, 20% discount, and you can't get in the parking lot.
yeah, I don't know if that would be a good time. People are in a frenzy at that point. Yeah. So also these 2023 ideas, and so I'm going to leave this slide up and we can keep talking about it and see if we can't hone in on something. Okay, so monthly meeting program contribution. We're getting into a little bit of a cycle. Zeno's not on the call today. I think I need to check in with Zeno to see if there's a way to involve him in slide creation, but everyone else is kind of ready to make slides. If anyone wants to join us, it's really simple. Make 3 slides, speak to them during the course of the meeting, that sort of thing. And we have it all broken out with assignments. And you can take someone's assignment or take legislation and policy possibly. So EV events and offers. We've got the Holly high voltage experience today and tomorrow. I just want to remind people, if you are shopping for a car, that there might be some cars to look at there. And there aren't a lot of times when you could see a bunch of different cars. And then Jerry and I can tell you that they have some really cool remodeled cars. You know, they've got an electric DeLorean usually. My favorite, they had a really cool VW bus, that sort of thing. And then you can also watch John Parmerly peel out in his Geo Metro, paired side by side with other aftermarket Nissan Leaf built out cars, and a lot of Model 3s going up the raceway as well. Anything else to add, Jerry?
And just, I've never been to a raceway before. Being in the raceway experience and walking around to get to different places on the track and watching people do things was interesting. And as you pointed out, bring your own food, because buying food was a painful experience. But I have to say, the Volkswagen, I looked into the Volkswagen afterwards and then found out that it was going to cost more than my airplane. So I kind of backed off.
Would it have been more fun than your airplane? I guess that's
Oh, well, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
You go faster.
Yeah.
What kind of VW was it?
It was like an old classic VW bus that they hadn't done a small job on it. They had done like a big job on it. And it was
and they'll do it to yours too. And I think the conversion cost is $150,000 or $160,000. But it's beautiful.
It was all like kind of bird's eye maple wood on the inside, and you know, custom seating. Yeah, it was beautiful.
And it's a company out of Petaluma.
And what kind of range did it get?
And not very far. I think it was, you know,
it's like a Leaf battery.
It was like, yeah, it was probably, was it a Leaf battery they put in it?
Something like that, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe it was. Okay. It was something like, you know, 80 miles, 90 miles.
I think when they did it, they thought 90 miles is good. And if they were to redo it, they'd have a different opinion, you know.
Well, I've got a 1980s Westphalia Vanagon camper van, and it's heavy. It's got a lot of built-in cabinetry, and then I have my gear in it. And I would love to convert it to electric, but would have to have reasonable range because I take it places where there's no charging. I'd need to be able to get back. But also, I don't have that kind of disposable income. Thank you. So
I mean, that was the whole, I mean, if you looked at it, it was actually interesting. After that, I started looking to see, okay, can I get those Volkswagens? And I found out on the web, you can get one that's fully rusted, has no wheels, has no drivetrain, has no engine, and it's $19,000. I mean, these things are really classics at this point. Something comes out of a junkyard for $20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw my 79 Adventure Wagon running up 116 and it's still running. So, yeah, these cars, they're people keep them up. They keep them up, they keep them going. So I've got a few new cars up here. This was Zeno's idea that we should start to talk a little bit about the EVA, our parent organization's newsletter. And so you get a little email announcement in your inbox, and I think it's really publicly available. It's no longer a member benefit. And, you know, they're doing the same thing we are, but like a little bit cleaner. They're curating news and posting it on their site, which is actually something that I do during the course of my weekday for my job, is curate news and post it on a site. So it's pretty simple to do. This month they talked about 3 new models: the Chevy Blazer, which is the red one here, the Genesis E60, which is a bigger SUV, and then also the announcement that VW made that they're going to revive the Scout brand and build a Scout pickup. And they actually just showed like a very simple rendering of this Scout style pickup. And then I picked up an artist's rendering of what they imagined this might come out to be. So this is in the making. David, you had a question about this?
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Oh, okay, I did my touch screen there, but I got to let go of the button once I touch it. I was driving up 101 from Roanoke Park to Santa Rosa last night and got behind a Rivian. So, and it peeled off at Highway 12 in the direction of Sebastopol. So keep your eyes open.
Okay.
The other thing I learned from talking to Brian Hall, you'll remember a couple years ago, we had that meeting with Select Track, you know, the tractor guys, and maybe this was covered in the Press Democrat and I missed it, but Heckeroff has sold the company for $25 million. And Brian said, oh, the handful of people are all buying Teslas now. So
Nice.
that was news to know that Brian said they made 6 tractors and somebody bought them for $25 million. So
I did read about that. Yeah, and I think we covered it last month, but I think it was an Indian company, Mahindra, that bought them, and they're going to actually make the tractors on a greater scale, it sounds like. So there must have been something there for them that they wanted.
well, yeah, I mean, that's certainly what their plan was to import the iron, the whole chassis of the tractors from India. So yeah, that would make sense. But the fact that they'd gotten to the point where the employees had stock options, that was a surprise.
Nice deal. So here's another thing that we can put up on NBEAA.org, and that would be a link to the EVA blog, myeva.org/blog. And you can get to all of the the parent organization news that's coming through from there. So I wanted to let you know about some of what was covered in June, but also just the fact that that's available to you. And you may or may not be getting those emails in your inbox already. Oops. This one, Jerry, you sent us in the LA Fire Department's new EV.
Yeah, and I actually sent it off to Caleb. I thought maybe he would know about it. But it's interesting because one is I don't know the company at all, and I usually track those companies. But we're starting to see this One of the projects that Caleb was responsible for was not a fire engine, but was an ambulance, an EV ambulance that was done by Winnebago. And one of the companies that we had worked with, the only thing they did to start with was fire engines and ambulances. And they were looking at EVs as well. So since these things, in most cases, that fire engines might be an exception, because fire engines, sometimes you have to send them out to, like a forest fire as a volunteer group. But in most cases, they're right in your town anyway. And they need the power once they get to the site to run things. And they run the engines in order to make electricity, in order to run a lot of the tooling that they have, pumps and stuff.
Yeah,
I don't have much more to say about it. So, yeah.
I was wondering about the 2 hours of operation. So, say this is used by paramedics and people are choking on peanut butter in LA and they're running out. And does it take them more than 2 hours to, complete a call and get back and recharge?
I'm hoping that's 2 hours of driving.
Yeah.
And pumping, but not like just loitering.
Right. Yep. Although they'll run the AC and they'll enjoy that. Yeah.
I mean, I wonder why they didn't put in a larger battery pack, because that's only like twice the size of a conventional car.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Yeah. Maybe they just, I don't know a lot about fire stations and the types of engines they have and how long they need. They're going very short distances, I would think.
Yeah. And the 132, that's actually the buses that run all day in Mountain View only have 110 kilowatt hours, I think. If you're not going down the highway and not going a long distance, you can go long distance, go for a lot of hours.
Brad, you had a comment?
Yeah, I would also think that a fire department as large as Los Angeles is probably has a ton of different types of vehicles and different types of incidents calls and whatnot. So they might only send this out on specific calls.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And also this must be very much a pilot project.
It says class 1 on the side, and I don't know what that means in fire people's parlance.
Me either. Yeah. So I updated this slide from last month because it was the end of the quarter. I think the source that I'm using, the goodcarbadcar.net, had brought in the quarterly numbers for Teslas. And so I took a screenshot of, this is their car and truck category, so their broadest passenger category of all cars and trucks. And I just wanted to note that of all cars and trucks, Teslas were 12th, 15th, and 22nd most selling cars. And so I thought that was, that seemed pretty significant to me. I'd been tracking the Mustang Mach-E because it's a make and model of its own. And so when it shows up in these counts, that the EV is part of that count. The fact that it is an EV is part of that count. And just because I've been checking on the Mach-E regularly to see if there's any uptick in the amount of cars being sold, it actually was kind of disappointing news in June. They went way down in June. So they must have run out of inventory in June, because I think they've got a backlog of purchases. So. But
what's interesting is just consistent with a lot of and people read the news different ways statistically. And you look at Europe and you look at the States where internal combustion engine vehicles are either flat or dropping in sales. And the EV sales continue to go up, pretty much across the board year to year. But more in Europe than here, but as far as the ramp. But it's a change. When people, I read lots of articles that talk about, well, only 5% of the vehicles are EVs. But you look at not just the velocity of the change, but the acceleration of the change as well. So I think those numbers that everybody says that by 2027, more than 50% of the vehicles, new vehicles sold, will be electric, are probably going to be achieved.
Yeah, I was starting to get that feeling as well. I have a colleague who's in Norway this week, and we were talking yesterday, and I said, "Tell me about the EVs." And she goes, "Oh, they have a lot of EVs in Norway." And I said, "Yeah, I'm aware." And she goes, "You know, every parking lot has charging available, and I think about half of the cars are EVs, and a lot of them are Teslas." And I said, "Yeah, that's actually what we've learned, right? Is that 95% of the cars are EVs, but right now it's about, I think, 50% of the inventory. So it was just about exactly what she's seeing. And she was somewhere in between Trondheim and Bergen. So she was in some smaller area, but I don't think there's any difference when you get into a rural area or not.
Well, and the flip side is I just came from Alaska, and I did see one Tesla. I didn't see any other EV. And I'm not sure where you would buy one. And I made a point. My sister-in-law said, "Oh, we don't have any chargers." I said, "Oh, of course you do." So I bring up plug share. Anchorage has got a population of 250,000 people. I think I found 2 level 2 chargers available and no DC fast chargers.
My son just bought a EV6 2 weeks ago in Anchorage.
Oh, he did. I actually went looking for an EV6 in Anchorage, trying to see what the prices would be, and I couldn't find anybody advertising them.
They were, I don't know why they bought that. Well, we've been talking. He has an older car, and it's it's $8,000 over MSRP.
Okay. Yeah.
And there were two available. They had just come in. He bought this. I guess it was on Father's Day. It was kind of a Father's Day present that he and his wife decided he needed. So.
Yeah.
And I checked the dealership, and there were no EVs listed whatsoever in their inventory. So,
Lawrence?
Yeah, I was just looking at this list, and I'm really impressed at how many very large cars are on the list, and how the few cars that aren't large are Toyotas and Hondas.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really curious about covering maybe in a future month this open question of, like, you know, what's the lowest cost EV we could possibly, you know, purchase in the near future. I know there was a Honda Civic EV in Europe, and because it wasn't in the US, I didn't cover it. But, you know, it's cute, it's small, but you know, yeah.
China has some very cheap EVs, and GM makes a $6,000 EV over there. Someone picked up a small electric pickup truck from China. It cost $2,000 for the truck, another $500 for the air conditioning and the tilt back. But by the time they got it here, and first of all, it's not legal on the streets here, but by the time they got it here, it was $8,000, including shipping and everything. And part of the problem we have is there's lots of great cars in Europe, but they aren't allowed over here without extensive testing and reconfiguration, because of, I think it was 1988, maybe 98, the US manufacturers got together and forced something through Congress that made it very difficult for any cars from outside the US to be legally sold and driven here. And, you know, the European standards aren't worse than ours, they're just marginally different. And in the US, apparently some of the standards are based on people not wearing seatbelts, which is absolutely ridiculous. But in any case, there's just a lot of manufacturers who can't put the money up to get their cars to be legal in the US, between the modifications and the extensive testing and the throwaway cars that get destroyed in the testing. So that's a huge trade barrier that a lot of people aren't aware of. But look at Europe, there's lots of small, fairly inexpensive EVs as well. And of course, China even more, but their safety standards might not be anywhere near Europe.
Thanks for that reminder. I'd kind of forgotten that a lot of the times when we're not seeing certain cars, you know, like say certain cars are never going to pass certain standards in the US that are set, but some of them could pass standards. And I'd expected like a BYD from China to, you know, of sufficient size, still a small car, would be able to come out, get marketed in the US, but they'd have to incur all that cost, is what you're saying.
Right, and the European ones are just as safe as the American ones, but they aren't allowed because the standards are different.
Mhm.
Like in the US, apparently you can have either red rear turn signals or yellow rear turn signals, which of course is ridiculous, because if it's a red rear turn signal and one's out, you can't tell the difference between that and a running light or a brake light or whatever. But anyway, so some of our rules are just stupid, but in any case, they're intentionally different so that the European cars, which arguably are safer than American cars, aren't allowed to be sold here without, again, millions of dollars, maybe even $500 million put into certifying them.
Oh,
Protectionism. David Heacock, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody knew if this, your numbers on the Mach-E had anything to do with the the electrical contactor issues that were, they said they were either welding shut or welding open or something. My experience is they weld shut and they're always on, but I'm just wondering because I thought they stopped
Stop
delivering
production.
those. Yeah, and that's a big drop, and I was just wondering if that was related to that contactor issue.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. The other thing was, I think there was a retooling that happened with Ford's factory so that they could go faster. I thought it was related to the lightning, so I thought there was a shutdown to retool that factory so that they could reopen at a faster rate.
Yeah, I don't know. I had heard I know they had a problem and then they were recalling the cars, and that's not, you can't fix that with the software. You got to bring the car in if it's actually welded shut contactors. I had that problem with my car, so I know what they're talking about. But I just heard Tesla was having some problems with, I'm not sure the Model Y maybe, where capacitors were probably blowing up or something. I don't know. Again, that's not a software fix, that's a hardware fix. And I understand that problem too, because if you apply high voltage all of a sudden, you would think at this point though that both of those issues would have been well taken care of. And I'm kind of surprised that those are popping up now, and it just doesn't seem logical, because anybody that's have kind of messed around with electric cars known about these problems for 10 years. I can't understand why Ford and Tesla, unless they're manufacturing defects or something, is having these problems at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bolt has a system where instead of the contactors closing just right away, there's a separate set of contactors that closes through a resistor. So all the capacitors charge up slowly. So you have a much smaller arc as you close them. Basically, you have a low current contactors that bring all the capacitors up to voltage, and then the main contactors close with no load on them.
Yeah, well, that's typically what they do. I have a resistor that's in line, so when you turn the key on, you can actually, in my car, you can set it to any kind of delay you want. I have it set to like 7 seconds, so it charges up the capacitors, much slower. But capacitors in my case, and I'm assuming in Tesla's case, is in the inverters. And when you blow those things up, I mean, you got a major, a lot of work. You got to take the whole thing apart. You probably have to replace the inverter. I don't know. They might have capacitor someplace else, but it's like you said, if you apply all that voltage at 400 volts or 700 or 800 volts all at once, you get this real spike in current. That typically what I've seen, at least in custom things, they put a resistor in there and it bypasses and charges them up slow. But I guess what I'm saying is I can't believe Tesla's having that problem now. Everybody's been messing with electric cars for so long. It just seems weird that that's the situation.
I wonder if, like you say, it might be a bad batch of contactors, because we had the capacitor plague back in the early 2000s where people put out these capacitors that were built from a stolen formula and something was miscopied. And there were
Yeah.
many years of bad capacitors that are still plaguing us if you have old equipment.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. It just seems like, everybody keeps talking about, well, they're going to add this to the card and it's just a software change and you'll know about it the next morning when you get up. But these are hardware problems and it's not going to, and that's why I said the Mach E numbers. I'm just wondering because I thought they sort of stopped. They didn't stop selling them. They stopped delivering them, I think is what happened. They said, well, the cars are here, but we got to check them out or something. So we can't deliver them
It might
because
have,
they had
yeah,
these problems. Yeah. So
yeah, they might have
I
put
don't
it
know
on hold.
what it is. But the
Yeah.
Mach E's been selling really well. I guess even in Europe, probably better. I don't know. But anyway.
Yep. So I think, Jerry, you forwarded this Cal Matters hearings item in, and I don't know if you want to speak to it.
Wait a second, I got to remember what I sent in. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, so there's been, it's interesting because 20 years ago, I testified in Sacramento, and people talked about what we can't do with EVs, and it had to do with the vehicles. What we're seeing now is there's a lot of testimony going on talking about the infrastructure not being able to support EVs. We talked about the state not doing enough. Actually, I've gone to a number of the hearings for CARB for changes in regulations, and the staff there is fairly aggressive, and so they're getting a lot of pushback now on, well, if you do that with EVs, then that's going to cause these problems. And I just saw this one article on this, and people saying we don't want EVs because it's going to cause problem on our electrical grid, and we have all these new issues coming up, and the low income problem is the one that often shows up as well. But that was probably as true when gasoline powered vehicles were introduced as well. Volumes change all of that, and I think the infrastructure will adapt, and much more than that. And just I thought it was a good news item to show some of the pushback.
Yeah, I've been surprised that sometimes you get these kind of strange stories like that currently we're not going to have enough infrastructure to handle all these cars, or people can't buy affordable EVs, and that means we shouldn't have EVs. So there's some kinds of strange logic that EVs are going to always be too expensive, I think. And I feel like we're just within a couple of years going to solve for this low cost EV problem. That temporary constraint.
I think part of what it highlights is that people don't deal well with recognizing a context change. So as the EVs are introduced, will we do things the same way we did them before? And people make the assumption, and then the objections are, we'll do things the same way we did before. I mean, I'm just thinking about one example. You have solar panels. Most of us have solar panels. We were gone, so I'm checking my power usage, and I've only got 4 or 5 kilowatts on my house. In the last 4 months, last 3 months actually, I've shipped 600 kilowatt hours back to the grid. Now, that doesn't sound like very much, but our house is all electric at this point. That's a context change. And all electric, somebody say you can't, Woody and I are both on the climate committee in Sebastopol, and often we'll have somebody saying, well, we're not going to, if we went all electric, we won't have enough electricity in our buildings. Hey, I'm charging the car too. So all the driving that we do and everything in the house, and we're sending power back to the grid with what is actually a fairly small, compared to Bernie's solar setup. So that context change is not recognized when people start making the objections. And I don't think that at the state level that CARB can actually turn around and say, you know, these other things are happening.
I was talking, excuse me, I was talking to the PG&E solar division. They're pretty helpful folks a couple of months ago about an issue. And I said, why is it that for those places that have electric cars like me that want to charge my electric car, I have to charge it at night because that's the cheapest rate, but that's base load power basically. And then in the middle of the day, we have all this solar, so much solar.
Oh, that's not true, Mark. That's not true anymore. The schedules have changed. The schedule now is midnight till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So most of the day, they actually changed. EV2A schedule was introduced because of the solar, and they have to go very slowly. And I actually meet once a month with somebody from PG&E also, and they don't have full control over that. They pitch new schedules, but then the CEC has to approve the new schedules, and it takes a year or whatever.
Yeah, so either you're on a grandfathered plan or that hasn't rolled out yet, but the problem's been solved in the future. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate just a little bit on that? Because when I had my plan for 5.5 years.
Okay, so last year, and in fact, there's now also something else which is happening. A lot of people are still tiered. You know, for an EV driver, you know, you're not tiered. Even solar panels, you're not tiered during time of use. But throughout the state, the entire state, all of the utilities are being forced to go to time of use, and all customers are going to time of use, not tiers. The time of use, E9 was the first time of use I had, then E7. When I moved up here, I had an EV2. EV2A is one that now recognizes the duck curve. And so the least expensive times, it still is inexpensive at midnight, but it's inexpensive also from 7 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Through the peak period time of solar, you're at the lowest rate. The peak time is, partial peak is from 3 o'clock until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Peak is from 4 o'clock until 9 p.m. at night. 9 p.m. until midnight is partial peak once again. And then you go into the low rate, starting at midnight with the base load. At one time, and they'll probably change it again. At one time, the state of California, not state of California, PG&E, had to pay other states to take power from California because of the base load at midnight. Yeah. Because they couldn't shut down the plants. Right. If you shut down the plant, it just took too long to start them back up again. And they had no place to put the power. And if you have no place to put the power, the voltage can go up. So they had to ship it out of the state, and they actually had to pay other states to take the power from us. Okay, that's changing because of the amount of solar we have, the amount of renewable we have. You'll see more of that occur. You also saw the announcement this last week of likely continuing to run Diablo and relicense it for a longer period. Because there is some base load that you want to have, and you want that base load not to be fossil fuel based.
Let's not get into that too far, because Lawrence has had his hand up.
Yeah, fine. That's the answer. Is whatever schedule you have, you call PG&E and tell them you want EV2A. Let's switch it for you tomorrow.
Well, I'll have to call them and see what they have to say and look at the alternatives then. Okay, thanks for the update.
So I wanted to address a few issues that we've spoken about in the last few minutes. Is that for a lot of people, adoption, especially lower income folks, is hindered by lack of charging at multifamily unit buildings. And whether we get public charging nearby, whether we get more charging in the buildings, power sharing software and equipment is really important in that regard, because when you go to retrofit a building, you don't necessarily want to replace the transformer and the main boards and everything. The technology is there, but it's a question of having contractors understand it and use it, and also the utilities to trust the equipment. Like with the DCC9, you don't even need a circuit breaker. You just intercept the wires between the meter and the breaker box. And then when those conductors carry less than 80% of their capacity, they'll fire up the EV chargers. Also, there's questions of carbon credits, and generally individuals can't take it, but businesses can. So that means that all charging at MURBs should probably be off the multiple unit residential buildings should be off the common meter, so that then the MURB can recover the carbon credits. Or we should get the rules changed so individuals can get the carbon credits.
Yeah.
And then as far as electricity goes, my understanding is that so much electricity goes into the creation of gasoline that you can drive an EV further just on that electricity without the fossil fuels involved at all, just looking at the electricity that goes into extracting and refining the fossil fuels.
Okay.
Your EVs can go farther on that than on that electricity than it does in producing the gasoline to go the same distance.
Hey,
So-
Lawrence, you need to dig into that one, because 2 years ago, I wanted us to put a presentation together on exactly that topic. And if you look at multiple papers, the difference in the numbers that are related for the different papers, one of them said you go 6 times further. Other ones say, no, that's not really not the case. It's not as simple as some of the articles actually. So nobody's ever done a presentation on it. If you wanted to do a presentation on it and dig into it, that would be terrific. Because when I started looking at it, I realized that there was some argument both ways. I just want to point out something else. The apartment thing, and Woody can jump in on this one too. There's multiple cities in the zoning. You're going to find now the zoning in Sunnyvale, the zoning in Mountain View. I don't know in Palo Alto, the zoning here have all been changed. So that if you're multifamily, there's a certain percentage of charging stations that must be included. It turns out state of California in Title 24, the 2022 proposal shows for multifamily also new provisions that require charging for multifamily units. Part of what New York City is doing, it's done in Europe, and we're actually looking at here too, is to put charging units on power poles as well. So on the street, instead of having to go to a special place, you live in a multi-unit unit, or it turns out in Sunnyvale, 52% of the population rents. Here in Sebastopol, a little town, 50% of the population rents. Okay, you can't necessarily make these changes yourself. So we need to make the accommodation someplace where they can go and be home, park their car, and have the same convenience we have if you have your own home.
And so, part of that as well is I think we should encourage people to charge slowly during the day on all that surplus solar, even 120 volt outlets, at wherever people are, whether it's at work, whether it's home, shopping, just kind of ubiquitous, low current, low voltage charging at times when there's a surplus of power. And then this is where bidirectional charging, which we're right on the cusp of, all the standards are in place. We just need to get adoption by utilities, automakers, chargers, and people who buy the cars to use bidirectional chargers in the evening, so that when we hit the duck curve spike, we can level it out.
But the Department of Energy has a program right now, and the utilities in California, PG&E, Southern California, Edison, both are members in the program, working on doing pilot, and we had a meeting with them, pilot programs on, they now call it vehicle grid integration. And PG&E has 4 different programs, pilots that they are trying to put together. They have to get the approval from the CEC for the changes required to do that. And I met with the woman who's managing that group. I said I want to sign up for it, so we were looking at that. It's we have a group that we meet with. It's an energy group in the North Bay cohort, and a couple of folks from PG&E also joined the group to meet with us, tell about the programs that they're working on. So we've also had, over the last 2 years, had presentations or in the news, the 4 or 5 different companies that make vehicle to grid or vehicle to home charging systems. They're not yet approved for use, and I only know of one person trialing one so far.
So in Palo Alto, they're talking about putting millions of dollars into studies looking at how we can upgrade our local grid to handle home electrification. Mm-hmm. So I watched a presentation where this guy in Holland used some software, and they had a town or city, and they said, okay, what happens as we electrify homes? What happens as we add EVs to our local grid? And what they found is that if you want to electrify your homes without adding any electric cars in the mix, either bi-directional or charging, it's going to take 25 additional transformers. Now, if you want to charge EVs without bi-directional charging, without smart charging, just people come home and plug them in at the worst possible time, we're going to take 48 additional transformers. Now, if you have EVs with bi-directional charging, and this includes entire home electrification, you need 6 additional transformers.
Yeah.
And then,
You're
of course,
you're making
with
the
the
point about
transformers,
that.
you also have larger distribution wires. So basically, what if you follow the study and you believe in this stuff, that we definitely need to look at bi-directional charging as part of the mix as we upgrade our local grids and pour millions of dollars into these studies. So I've been lobbying Palo Alto utility to say, look, you've got to take this, you know, the technology isn't quite there yet. I mean, the technology is, but the adoption isn't there. The manufacture of the equipment isn't there, but it's coming, and we need to take into account if we want to upgrade our grid for home electrification in a thrifty manner and not spend a lot of extra money.
The major thing which is stopping all of that is regulations that don't understand the context change. And what you're talking about is a distributed grid, and the regulations actually support a centralized grid, the power sources. So that is the real problem. You actually get into this. I've been doing this for a couple of years now.
When utilities hate the idea of distributed energy resource because they lose control, and can they trust the consumer to plug their car into a bi-directional charger in the evening?
Well, and the answer so far is actually up here in Sonoma Clean Power, they did the testing for that, and they found out that they couldn't. And they ran into a problem with that. So,
and the other part is that some studies show, you know, people say, oh, I don't want my car range to be, or battery degradation to increase from bi-directional charging. But some studies have shown that when people plug their car in all the time for bi-directional charging, there's less degradation than casual charging, which most people who don't do bi-directional charging do, where you cycle it, say, from 20% to 80%. And on top of that, Tesla and other people are doing some research at electrolyte additives that will allow the current architecture of batteries to have this chemical added electrolyte, which will increase the number of cycles by a factor of 8, which would give us a 3 million mile battery that's good for 100 years. And you don't need that for a car, but you do need that for a car plugged in for bi-directional charging, or it's helpful. Because we don't have enough battery resources to do grid storage and EVs for full rollout for everybody. And that's just seems unreasonable to have cars sitting 96% of the time unused when we need those batteries for grid storage.
Well, I'm going to push us forward, but we should definitely do bi-directional charging. I don't know, Jerry, if you're going to dig into that for us.
Well, at some point, I want to get a DC. I wanted to get a DC bell, and I'm going to keep talking to the PG&E folks about getting some trials up here.
Yeah. Cecilia, I think you put in the information about the June 30 Supreme Court EPA ruling, and we keep hearing more and more. So did you want to speak to this?
Yeah. There was a ruling that happened, and basically what the Supreme Court determined was that the EPA can't arbitrarily decide how to, limit carbon emissions, and that Congress needs to be the one to specify, what the EPA can enforce. So this makes it harder for the executive branch to be like, this is a target, this is what we want to do, and then have the EPA actually make targets to make that happen. It's like, it needs to go through Congress, and we know how our Congress works here. It's like, it's hard to get anything to happen. So this could be very bad for limiting carbon emissions.
So have people been hearing that, Michael Regan of the EPA is kind of retooling how they're going to try to regulate CO2 through the regulation of pollutants, choosing other factors other than climate change as the factor. So I think while this has occurred, it's basically caused a whole ripple effect where the EPA is going to kind of change their approach And it is going to be harder, but not impossible to regulate CO2 through the regulation of kind of related pollutants, that sort of thing. So I think we're going to learn a little more as we go. So there might be some more to kind of report in on for next month.
Some people are arguing that this particular case, it isn't such a big deal because economic forces are going to reduce that pollution that they were looking to pollute. Like, well, coal is on its way out, for instance, just economically, and there's really no way to save it with a court ruling. So some people are arguing that the particular case involved is not a big deal, but yeah, the wider implications are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, Cecilia.
Yeah, so last month we talked about this modified Model 3 that was given some big off-road treads, and they did a video where they did it. It was pretty impressive what it was able to do, but I think they pushed it a little too far. So there's a video if you want to watch it. It's in German. There was no audio subtitles as last time I checked it.
There was a question last month about how do you get in and out of this car?
Yeah, so I think initially you had to go in through the window, but I think they modified the doors to kind of open up so that you can it opens up kind of
Gull wing kind of thing.
The sideways kind of open, not sideways, but they stay in line, and then you can get in that way.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I just want to know what Tesla's going to call that model.
Not designed for drag racing.
That's the no warranty model.
Yeah, the no warranty model. Volkswagen Group in front of a groundbreaking ceremony here. Where are they?
Oh, this is I think this is somewhere in Europe. I don't recall exactly where this was, but they are building a facility for building batteries, and so
European batteries.
they are announcing that they're investing in 20 billion euros, which is about 20 billion US, along with some of their partners, and they're really serious about making batteries work. So.
And last year in their EV rollout, this is where we're going as a group, which was really impressive. They outlined the number of places that they're going to build battery factories. And also, at the same time, they're building a battery recycling factory. And I think it was in Norway.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think
they're doing that before they have the batteries to recycle. So
JB Straubel's doing the same thing up in Nevada, where he's going to start. It's
just south of Reno. Yeah.
So he's going to start with virgin ore and scrap from the battery manufacturing plants, but eventually we'll take retired batteries
and stuff too.
Yeah, but the batteries he's taking so far are from cell phones and stuff like that. It's not taking anything from EVs.
Is that company? Is that Redwood? Is that Redwood Materials or something else? Something like that?
Yeah,
that's it. And then I think last month or 2 months ago, we announced that, I don't know if you say CATL or CATL, the big Chinese battery manufacturer, was going to put in a US battery manufacturing facility. So I've been kind of curious as we start to see these announcements, how many large battery manufacturing facilities are there across the world? And, how many cars does that represent? So, I think there's a point at which we're really going to see kind of this at a high production level where we might get to the, lower cost battery production that everyone's promising.
Volumes.
Yeah. How soon is that?
I don't know. I read this and it seemed unbelievable at the time. When Tesla was building the Gigafactory, there was an announcement that when they finished building the Gigafactory, if nothing else had happened at the time, that would represent 50% of all battery creation worldwide, production worldwide. And so that's the kind of ramp we're seeing. But you've got GM, you've got Ford, you've got VW. VW is the largest vehicle manufacturer in the world, building battery factories.
Yeah.
Currently, all of the raw material refining and whatnot is done in China. And so that's why what Straubel's doing in Nevada is a real big deal. And he says to take care of the US demand would take 10 more factories like the one he's building, or maybe 9 more factories.
No, it's more than that. Stanford did a report recently and talked about by 2030, I think it was, the amount of recycling that we could do would account for roughly 6% of the demand that we have for the materials. Bernie sent me something, said, no, it's 95%. What the 95% was the amount of recyclability that we had, but the amount of material that we could recover because of the amount of demand that is growing is fairly small. So we're going to still be going back to raw materials for quite some time.
That's what Straubel's doing, is he's taking raw materials and refining them for use in batteries. And that'll be the main focus of the factory until there's enough retired batteries to take over and close the loop. But right now, people are having to rely on China. If you mine something, you send it to China, and then it comes back in order to build batteries.
The refining. Yeah. So do you think that Redwood Materials has kind of a ramp up plan where they are going to be building out more factories? Have they announced any like a second or a third factory yet?
I haven't heard. They're still building the first one.
Got it.
You know, there was a report that we did, a news article that I sent in several months ago, and it was talking about constraints from lithium. We're going to move away from cobalt and nickel with the other chemistries, but lithium will still be there because it's in the periodic chart. But it talked about 6 or 7 different methods of harvesting lithium, and the problem was that we've never invested, because we didn't need that much lithium, invested in finding production techniques for getting those at a reasonable cost. The cost was too high, like getting it from the ocean or getting it from a number of different salts where lithium actually is involved. And I always think of that the same as aluminum. You remember aluminum in the early 1800s, aluminum was more valuable than gold. But today, we drink from cans from made aluminum because we found a way of producing it a lot less expensively.
So, Cecilia, did you send this one in as well? The non-Tesla supercharging?
I did. Yeah, so Biden administration released a fact sheet, and they mentioned Tesla is working on building equipment for superchargers that will support non-Tesla EV drivers in North America.
Okay.
That was it. It's just a little thing. And
So,
did they talk at all, Cecilia, about the viability of that as a business by itself? I saw when David sent something in too, I went looking, and there were questioning articles about whether putting in fueling stations was a viable business model. Could somebody make money on EV fueling stations?
I don't know about that.
yeah, I don't know if we know much about how it's working out in Europe, but coming to a charging array near you maybe soon, they'll start to switch these out. So Tor took a trip, and maybe we'll get him to talk about it next month, but this is my kind of a last item here that he just commented on his own 50 kilowatt charging rate for his Bolt versus 250 kilowatts in the Kia EV6 near him. He was a little jealous, it sounded like. Yeah. So I can't believe we took all of our 2-hour time to just go through the little amount of news that we processed, but we were able to hit a lot of important topics. I don't know if anyone's going to the Holly High Voltage experience later. It sounded like maybe most of us were not going to make it this time around. We've got links at the end of this slide deck. We're working on moving these links over to nbeaa.org. We don't have anyone lined up for the next meeting, but we do have some news to cover as we did this month. This is working for everyone to kind of stay informed.
Mhm.
I wonder if we should contact John and see if it's time for us to be in person, and we'll try to see what we can hack together for a hybrid. I think Lawrence is right. I kept thinking we just need 2 laptops, 2 screens, and 2 projectors to do the first version.
I think gaining experience would be great. Perhaps if we see things moving along in the right direction, we could try that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So shall we leave it at that this month? And some good topics came up that I made notes about, like, bidirectional charging, and then also just the equity concerns about EVs and the misinformation that kind of comes out of those equity concerns. I think that would be interesting to talk about in the future. So we can dig into more topics going forward.
Just want to throw out the idea, worst case scenario for a hybrid meeting is everyone has their laptop in front of them and you share a room, but you can talk over the laptop, but you've got a good camera there pointing at you for the people who are far away. And of course there'd be the issue with feedback. Have to figure that one out.
You just can't join audio. So like everyone
Yeah.
can use video only for their laptops, but it's really important not to use mute.
Yeah, that's how the MTC meetings are done today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a good idea. Yeah.
Well, everyone could have earbuds in. That's one way to get rid of the feedback.
No, that doesn't work, because I've tried that and you still get the feedback.
Oh, because your mic's going into multiple computers at once.
One issue with having everyone muted is that when someone like in the audience is talking, you won't necessarily see their video. It won't be highlighted. So it might be, harder to figure out like who's talking unless you recognize his voice, whatever.
All right, we're ready to stop recording.